I would change that sign and say, condemn anti-Semitism, demolish anti-Semitism, demonize anti-Semitism, and shame and humiliate every anti-Semite on earth. That's what I would say. I want to dedicate this talk to my mother, who I lost only a few months ago, a 98-year-old Holocaust survivor, and to my father, who also survived Auschwitz. He lost his entire family, my mother half her family. And they often said to me, if we had vocal, evangelical, serious Christians in the 30s and 40s, maybe history would have been different. Thank God we have them today. This is the most important thing I can show you before I make my few remarks. This is the Middle East. The yellow are the 22 Arab countries, including Iran, which is a Muslim country. It's not Arab. This yellow you can barely see is the size of Israel. The Arab world is 800 times the size of Israel. And the world is screaming, land for peace, which won't work anyway. Land for peace. Who are they asking to give up the land? Is this unbelievable? Imagine if there were 22 Jewish countries around a little tiny Arab country, and the Jews say, we want parts of that small country, Arab country, to make a 23rd Jewish country. Would the world say, great idea? They say that is disgusting. That is what we're up against. Look at the size of Libya and Egypt and Sudan and Saudi Arabia, Iraq. By the way, Texas is 36 times the size of Israel. Texas, 36 times. We're talking about a tiny little country the size of New Jersey and Rhode Island. During the Holocaust that my parents survived, the Nazis demonized and boycotted and tortured and murdered 6 million innocent, beautiful Jewish men, women, and almost 2 million Jewish children, and 5 million more non-Jews. And the world then said, why didn't you Jews fight back? Today, the Iran-backed Arab Hamas Nazis demonize and lie about Jews in Israel and launch unprovoked 4,000 missiles into the Jewish state of Israel's major population centers to murder Jews. And the Palestinian Authority, let's not forget Mahmoud Abbas. He's no moderate. He demonizes and lies about Jews, and he pays Arabs to murder Jews. He pays Arabs to murder Jews. And the more Jews an Arab kills, the higher his lifetime pension. Can you imagine that is one of his policies? They spent $400 million last year paying Arabs to murder Jews. Imagine if Israel paid Jews to murder Arabs. The world would go ballistic. Yet that's the situation. So the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is no different than Hamas. They're both despicable Arab extremist, Jew-hating, America-hating Nazis. But today's Jews, we Jews fight back with the brilliant Jewish developed Iron Dome, with the great and courageous and extraordinarily moral Israel Defense Forces and Israel Air Force. We Jews fight back. No more defenseless, cowering, defenseless Jews. No more. Those days are over. The Iran-backed Arab Hamas Nazis, I call them Nazis, because their charter, Article 7, calls for the murder of every Jew on earth. Article 12 calls for Israel's destruction. That's who Hamas is. They used giant lies as a pretext to attack the Jewish state, that Israel is ethnically cleansing Jerusalem of Arabs. Lies such as the eviction lie have motivated Jew haters around the world to attack Jews. What's the truth of this eviction lie? 5 Arab families refused to pay rent to their landlords for decades. Finally, after decades of fighting in court, an Israeli court ruled, you can evict those Arabs who are refusing to pay rent, as any court in the world would have ruled. It is not ethnic cleansing, it is rent deadbeats cleansing. And by the way, if these people refusing to pay rent for decades were Jews, they would be evicted as well. This has nothing to do with their ethnicity. Nothing. It's not ethnic cleansing. The continuing general Arab claim of ethnic cleansing is ridiculous. You keep hearing that. Israel is ethnically cleansing Israel of Arabs, excuse me. Well, in 1948, there were 150,000 Arabs in this area of Israel. Today, there are 2 million Arabs in this area of Israel. Whoever is in charge of Israel's ethnic cleansing program has to be fired immediately. It's not working. It's not working. I want somebody more competent. And the world condemns Israel's response to 4,000 Hamas rockets as disproportionate. It's an absurd theme only used against the Jewish state. Let me tell you what Colin Powell, when he was head of the American Armed Forces, said. America should enter fights with every bit of force available. Go in full force from the beginning rather than escalate yourself into a quagmire. Overwhelming U.S. force assures success at the minimum risk to Americans in uniform. That's the way any army does it. And Israel doesn't even do that. Israel is so careful to avoid civilian casualties, endangering their own people, their own armed services people. And Hamas started this unprovoked war. If there were no Hamas missiles, there would be no retaliatory defensive Israeli missiles. They caused this war, not Israel. Israel wanted no war. In fact, only 200 Arabs were killed in this war. 120 of them were terrorists. And the others, almost all of them were killed by Hamas missiles that didn't make it out of Gaza and killed their own people. It's extraordinary what Israel did to prevent the death of Arabs. I'm also sick and tired of hearing the lie that we're only critical of Israeli policies. I have nothing against the Jews. But of course, those people who condemn Israel policies, they never criticize China policies or Cuba or Venezuela or Iran or Sudan or Syria, who perpetrate monstrous human rights crimes. You don't hear about that. So we know they condemn Israel not because of their policies, but because Israel is filled with Jews. That's why they do it. And anti-Zionists who say we're not anti-Semitic, we just are against the state of Israel. But I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not against Jews. Well, if you're against the Jewish state, it means you're against Jews. I can assure you, if you tell me you don't want Italy to exist, I think you might hate Italians. If you don't want Spain to exist, I think Spanish people are not your cup of tea. And those who say the Jewish state shouldn't exist are people who hate Jews. That's what they are. What might be some of the reasons for the dramatic increase in this upsurge of anti-Semitic attacks? We must face the painful truth and reality that almost all of the physical and verbal attacks against Jews in the last few weeks, as painful as it is for me to say it, are committed by radical Arab Muslim Americans. It's not white supremacists. There may be some, almost all Arab Muslim Americans. We've got to say that. Should we be shocked or surprised by this fact? ADL surveys show that 49% of Muslims around the world have anti-Semitic attitudes. And among Muslim countries, in the Middle East, 75 to 95% of Muslims have anti-Semitic attitudes. And important numbers of Muslims are immigrating to the U.S. from those countries in numbers we've never seen before. These people hate Jews. As a recent European conference that I participated in, combating anti-Semitism, an expert said, 20 years ago, the major problem in anti-Semitism was on the far right. But it's now flipped. The major problem is radical Muslims and the far left. The great scholar in anti-Semitism, Professor Robert Wistrich, wrote, Muslim anti-Semitism is a clear and present danger. Massive immigration of Muslims into Europe have had a profound and adverse effect on European Jewry. And now we're seeing, I'm sorry to say, that same situation in the United States of America. And by the way, there's institutional support by Muslim imams all over this country, in New Jersey, and California, and North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. We have videotapes of these Muslims imams in America preaching, come and kill the Jew hiding behind a rock or a tree. And right here in Dallas, ladies and gentlemen, you may know, Imam Suleiman calls Jews evil, calls for a terror war against Israel, that Israel is the Ku Klux Klan, that Israelis are Nazis, that all of Israel is an illegal occupation. Israel massacres Arabs. Israel is an apartheid, genocidal, and ethnic cleansing state. There are no redeeming human qualities of these Zionists who are the enemies of God and all of humanity. Christians are all misguided. And only this week, Imam Suleiman tweeted and retweeted vicious lies against Israel, such as bombs are falling against the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. So these imams are encouraging and strengthening the Jew hatred that many of their constituents already have. Sarah Edan, Miss Iraq, said recently in an interview, she said, Muslims in the Arab world are taught that Jews hate Muslims and seek to destroy the world, that Jews are not human beings, they are satanic creatures in human form. And after Israel, she says, the Muslims, the extremist Muslims, are going to go after Europe, Britain, and the United States of America. The president of Egypt, the Muslim president of Egypt, Sisi, said last year, it is inconceivable that the thinking and the wrong ideas that we Muslims hold most sacred should cause the entire Islamic nation to be a source of anxiety, danger, killing, and destruction for the rest of the world. This is impossible, said Sisi. That thinking is antagonizing the whole world. We are in need of a religious revolution, says Sisi. You imams, he said this at Al-Azhar University, the major Muslim university in the world. You imams are responsible before Allah. The entire world is waiting for your religious revolution, said the Muslim president of Egypt. And what other problems do we have that may be causing this upsurge that we haven't seen maybe since the 30s, maybe never, against Jews? I have to tell you, and Joe Biden is a friend of mine. I've known him for 25 years. I'm not proud of that, by the way. His policies have emboldened the Jew haters and the Jewish state of Israel haters. This week, he announced he's giving $360 million to the terrorist dictatorship, the Palestinian Authority, that pays Arabs to murder Jews. He said he's going to bring hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars to Hamas, to Gaza, to rebuild Gaza. Well, if he rebuilds it with new roads, new homes, new buildings, then there's no negative consequence for them going to war. He should not rebuild Gaza until Hamas changes their despicable charter, until Hamas, yes, until Hamas destroys the 10,000 remaining rockets, until they dismantle the hundreds of miles of terror tunnels where they hide these rockets and try to enter Israel, until they stop promoting hatred and violence against Jewish people. Until then, not a penny of American dollars should go there. And not a penny of American dollars should go to the Palestinian Authority. Donald Trump stopped all money until the Palestinian Authority stops paying Arabs to murder Jews, until they rescinds the names. Do you know they've named over 100 schools, streets, sports teams, sports tournaments after Jew killers? Yes, that's what he does. Until he changes those names, there shouldn't be another penny that we send to them. Imagine if we have the Charlie Manson Cowboys, right? The O.J. Simpson Oilers. Oh, no, O.J. Simpson was acquitted. Excuse me, that's wrong about that. I'm sorry. And also, and I blame the Israeli leaders, Jewish leaders, for the following problems that I believe are a factor in enabling, encouraging, and emboldening people to hate Israel and Jews. Israel and religious leaders, Jewish leaders, rabbis, don't tell the truth about a number of things. Settlements. Settlements, I say we have to stop settlements. They're building all over the place. Almost all of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, is filled with settlements. What's the truth? Not a single new settlement has been built in Judea and Samaria, not a one, since Oslo began in 1993. Not a one. The only building has occurred within the boundaries of the existing settlements that were there in 93. What percentage of Judea and Samaria and the West Bank do the Jewish settlements comprise? 70%, 50%, 40%, 3%. 3%. It's almost nothing. And yet the world condemns Israel for building settlements constantly all over the place. It's not true. One of the great Orwellian lies. By the way, Article 24 of the PLO Covenant says they have no rights to Gaza and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. Another lie that's not explained is the issue of Jerusalem. The Arabs say, give us our holy city of Jerusalem. It's our holy city to us, and we want it and we need it. And people say, give them Jerusalem, at least parts of Jerusalem. Is Jerusalem, ladies and gentlemen, holy to Muslims? Jerusalem was the capital of Israel under King David 3,000 years ago. It has never been the capital of any other nation except Israel throughout history. When the Arabs conquered Palestine in 716 CE, did they make Jerusalem their capital? They made Ramla their capital. Of the four quarters in Jerusalem, Armenian, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, the Muslim quarter is the youngest. And listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Since the first census was taken in the mid-1800s, the majority of people living in Yerushalayim and Jerusalem have been Jews since 1850. Who knows that? Who knows that? In 1906, I have the travel guide to Jerusalem. In 1906, there were 60,000 people in Jerusalem. 13,000 Christians, 7,000 Muslims, 40,000 Jews. It's always been a Jewish city. We Jews have always lived there. People don't know that. Israel should make that clear. Rabbis, Jewish leaders should make that clear. No important place of Muslim learning was ever built in Jerusalem. And as the good pastor said, the Jewish holy book 700 or 800 times mentions Jerusalem, not once in the Koran. If this city is holy to the Muslims, how can they not mention it in the Koran? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like the Jews saying that New York City is a holy city. Well, it's not in the Bible. There's a lot of Jews who live there, a lot of synagogues, but it's not a holy city. Not to the Jews. The Jews face Jerusalem when we pray, the Muslims face Mecca. When the Arabs controlled Jerusalem from 48 to 67, when Jordan illegally occupied it, it was a slum. They didn't make Jerusalem the capital, they made Amman their capital. There was no electricity or plumbing or water, almost none. 58 synagogues in Jerusalem were destroyed by Jordan. This was a Jewish city, not an Arab city. And listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. Not a single Arab leader ever visited Jerusalem from 48 to 67 except King Hussein of Jordan. If it's so holy, would you explain to me how not a single Arab leader visited it? Because it's not holy to them. It's not true. Why are rabbis and Jewish leaders and politicians afraid to say that? I'm not afraid to say the truth. The truth is the truth. And truth, ladies and gentlemen, truth is not a political position. Truth is not a political position. And what about occupation? Oh my God, you can't turn on a television set about the Middle East without end the occupation, it's horrible, the occupation, they oppress the art of the occupation. Well, this story is also not told. Is there really an occupation, ladies and gentlemen? First of all, 40% of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, was given away by Israel already. 99 and 100% of Gaza. That's where 99% of the Palestinian Arabs live. They're not occupied. They control their own lives. They have their own parliament, their own schools, their own textbooks, newspapers, radio, TV, businesses, police force. They run their own lives except for security. Israeli forces are there because there's constant terror cells evolving to come into Israel to murder Jews. If there were no terror cells, Israel wouldn't be there. They run their own lives. There's no occupation. Plus, occupation means Israel illegally stole someone else's sovereign land. Of course, this was never the Arab sovereign land. Britain legally controlled it in 48, and Britain took what they had, and they said, we'll split it in half to the Arabs, half to the Jews. And when the Arabs said no, it was not theirs anymore, when they said no to that. So there is no occupation. This is another despicable, despicable lie that I blame the Jewish leaders, the rabbis, and others for not making clear. And finally, people are screaming, just give them a state. Just give them a state. Who can take it anymore? Establish a state and things will be lovely. Will that solve the problem, ladies and gentlemen, if the state was given? Let me tell you something. They don't want a state if it means accepting Israel. That's the problem. They were offered a state in 1937. 95% of the rest of Palestine was offered to the Arabs. They said no. In 1948, we all know about that was the real two-state solution. They went to war against Israel. They said no, no state if it means accepting Israel. Israel offered them a state in 2000, 2001, 2008. They said no every single time. I asked Ehud Olmert, the prime minister in 2008, how could Abbas have turned it down? You offered him 97% of Judea and Samaria, half of Jerusalem, billions of dollars in aid. How did he turn it down? What happened? How can this? I was attacking you, I said to the prime minister, in op-ed saying what you're offering is ridiculous. He said, Mort, I know. I read the articles. It gave me heartburn. I said, what happened? He said, Abbas called me and he said, you have to take out the clause that we support Israel as a Jewish state. You have to take out the clause that says we can't bring millions of refugees into Israel. You have to take out the clause that says no further claims. It's over. And Olmert says, I said to Abbas, well, we have to have no further claims. Why am I doing a deal? You're going to keep screaming, terrorizing, killing, and fighting against us. Of course, no further claims. It's over. That's why he wouldn't sign it. Because they don't want a state if it means accepting Israel. That's why nothing, ladies and gentlemen, has worked. Nothing has worked. And this will be a Hamas, Iran, Fatah terrorist regime. We all know that. And by the way, statehood doesn't make things lovely. Syria has a state. Iran has a state. North Korea has a state. Are they lovely, peaceful nations? No. A state will only strengthen their ability to promote their despicable agenda. It will be a terrible mistake if a state is established. By the way, this is their atlas. This is their atlas. You can see the Arabic. In their atlas, that's used in all 12 grades. This is the Middle East. The yellow is Israel. That's the West Bank in green. There it says West Bank in Arabic. That's Gaza. It says Gaza. What does the yellow say? That's Israel within the 67 lines. It says Palestine. They don't put the word Israel on their atlases that they use in their schools. This is the official logo of the Palestinian Authority. You haven't seen this. This should be in the front page of the New York Times, not that despicable picture of children who were killed in the war due to Hamas. This is their official logo, a shape of all of Israel, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza, with an Arab keffiyeh over all of it. Not just the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem, all of it. With Arafat, the notorious terrorist, and a Kalashnikov rifle. Is this the logo that an entity that wants to make peace with the Jewish state would use? No. This should be in every sermon that rabbis make, in the newspapers, in Jewish leaders and politicians. This logo tells you everything, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll end by saying, as the wonderful Miss Feldman said, and my father was from Czechoslovakia, my mother's from Poland. I was born in the displaced persons camp in Germany. My first language is Yiddish. We Jews and Christians recognize that miracles have occurred throughout history. Recognize that God is there and does extraordinary things that we can never foresee. We have to continue to believe in miracles despite the difficulties we're experiencing right now. Because the whole world, even though Israel was David and the whole Arab world was Goliath, Israel won the wars in 48, 56, 67, and 73. It was a miracle. And who would have believed that Israel, which began with 600,000 Jews in 48, 73 years later, has a population of 7 million Jews? It's a miracle. Who would have believed that 73 years ago, only 6% of the world Jews lived in Israel? Today, 50% of the world Jews. It's a miracle. And who would have believed that Israel would go from an agrarian economy to become one of the world's leading microchip and high-tech countries in the world? It's extraordinary. And this is one is amazing. Who would have believed that Israel would have made the desert bloom just as the Holy Bible promised? The Bible said the Holy Land will remain barren until the Jews return. Would humans Human beings would never write that, because human beings would say, well, suppose it's not barren. Then it's all, you can throw the book out the window. But God controls history. God controls history. So when he says it, it happens. And that's exactly what happened. It remained a desert until the Jews returned. And who would have believed that the Jewish state would have more scientists per capita, publish more scientific papers per capita, have more musicians and orchestras per capita than any country on the face of the earth? And who would believe the Jewish state would produce more than a dozen Nobel laureates, the highest percentage per capita of any country in the world? And that's extraordinary. And who would believe that we now have more students studying the Bible in yeshivas in Israel than at any time in Jewish history? And who would believe, ladies and gentlemen, that for the first time in history, a country would bring black people to its shores, not to be slaves, but to be a free and proud people? That's what happened with the Ethiopian Jews. That country is Israel, and that is extraordinary. And who would believe that after 2,000 years of dispersion, I'm almost done. It's the angel of the death of speeches hovering around me. Who would believe after 2,000 years of dispersion, there are now over 500,000 Jews in the holy city of Jerusalem, 450,000 Jews in the holy land of Yehuda and Shimron, given to the Jewish people by the Lord our God, King of the universe. And after 2,000 years, the Jews have sovereignty over all of the Jewish and Christian city of Jerusalem, never to be divided again, and that is a miracle. As the prophet Ezekiel said, if the watchman sees the sword advancing against the Jews and doesn't blow the horn so that the Jewish people are not warned, the sword comes and destroys even one Jew, I, said God, will demand a reckoning. So we must blow that horn courageously and continuously. One more paragraph.
What?
One more paragraph.
One more paragraph.
And that was right on cue. I'll pay you the money later. Thank you.
I cued him. I did it.
In every generation, as the Passover Haggadah foresees, enemies will rise up against the Jewish people. The Haggadah says that. But each time the Jews overcome our enemies and prevail, we always emerge to rebuild and become stronger than before. Future years will be a time of regeneration, hope, new opportunities, and stronger Jewish communities. The Torah promises that Israel is the Jewish homeland and that the Jews will be an eternal people. And unlike politicians, God keeps his promises. And I end by saying, be strong, as Joshua said, be strong, be not afraid, for God is with you. The cause of Israel is moral and just. We must act and speak out with courage. Truth and justice and God are on the side of the Eretz Yisrael. With your help, with the strength and the will of the Israeli people and the IDF, with the help of Almighty God, there'll be new miracles we can't foresee. And the people of Israel shall dwell in their holy land for eternity. We will prevail.
Yay!
Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai.